Our second speaker is Ruepert J.D. Chow, who is a PhD candidate in the School of Communication and Film at Hong Kong Baptist University. With interests in queer film, media, and minorities, Ruepert has co-published articles in development and practice and has book chapters in a couple of edited volumes, such as Taking the Square, Mediated Dissent and Occupations of Public Space, which was published by Rowan Littlefield in 2016, and Between Public and Private in Mobile Communication, Routledge 2017. And Rupert's presentation is entitled Pink and Yellow Ribbons, Iconographies of Resistance and the Construction of Sexual and Gender Identity in Dating Apps. Ruepert, thank you.
Thanks, Riti, for the introduction. And I want to thank Tejaswini and Denise for inviting me to be here with you tonight. So again, my presentation is entitled Pink and Yellow Ribbons, Iconographies of Resistance and Construction of Sexual and Gender Identity in Dating Apps. So this is an ongoing project that ties my interest with digital media, intimacy, and affordances of digital media. So this ongoing project is based on my partially my ethnography, digital ethnography with amateur gay pornographers in the Philippines. That's my doctoral project. But also with my I extended it to include dating apps in both the Philippines and Hong Kong, and cover sexual and gender minorities. That is queer individuals and women in this project. So to give you some context about the polarization of what motivates this research, by the way, is the increasing polarization of dating apps. One thing that I noticed when my partner was browsing the dating apps, because my partner is an HIV counselor in Hong Kong. So I noticed that there are many users who have yellow ribbons on their Grindr profiles. So I was thinking, well, most of these men are looking for sex, looking for sexual intimacy, but why is someone's political stance important for sex? So that was what motivated my research. And this is something that is not only happening in Hong Kong or among gay men. I know for a fact that increasingly partisan politics everywhere is getting more and more polarized, not just in the Philippines and Hong Kong, but also Democrats versus Republicans in the US, for example, and many other countries. So to give you some context about the polarization of politics in the Philippines and Hong Kong. So there was the famous Yellow Camp in the Philippines before the Yellow Camp in Hong Kong. And this was in 1986 with the ouster of the dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr. So this was when the Yellow movement in the Philippines started. And this was a pro-democracy movement that installed another democratic government in 1986. And that's the current model of government that we have now. Incidentally, Marcos Jr., the son of the late dictator that was ousted by this Yellow movement, is the incoming president in the Philippines the end of this month. So many people were fearing the return of authoritarianism in the Philippines, and because the Yellow movement has been spearheaded by the economic elite, a cultural and political elite in the Philippines, many in the lower strata of the society thought that, well, the Yellow movement is very elitist. We cannot really relate to them, which led to the Pink movement. The Pink movement is the reinvention of the Yellow movement in the Philippines to bring it to the lower levels of society, and also to appeal to to also to appeal to the fact that the one heading the yellow movement is a woman. So pink symbolizes that femininity that the leader of the pink movement wants to bring, who is the current Vice President Leni Robredo. Meanwhile, politics in Hong Kong is also very polarized, which culminated in the 2019 protest in Hong Kong. So it was a very chaotic and violent social movement between the government forces and the yellow movement, who described themselves as pro-democracy movement. So until now in Hong Kong and the Philippines, all these divides, all this polarized partisan and ideological politics we can still feel the effects of it. And the thing is, it has become ingrained in the digital dating cultures nowadays. So my previous research on social media and activism came in 2016 when I was researching with Cheryl Soriano how ethnic, sexual, and religious minorities in the Philippines are using social media for activist purposes. And we found out that many of these minorities are using social media to mobilize support and to put together narratives that counter the claims or representations made by mainstream media against them. So it's a chance for minorities to build their own representations and to write their own narratives. So the thing is, most of them use iconographies or symbols of resistance and association. LGBTQ movement, for example, is famously using the rainbow flags for a symbol of diversity and solidarity. Meanwhile, many of these photos, colors, have survived to migrate to the digital realm, and these colors, and some scholars argue as well, are simple but malleable, meaning they can be reappropriated in different media as well. I mean, not just, pink can be present in dating apps. It can be present in t-shirts. It can be present even in masks, for example, to signify political support. But as Katrine Jacobs was asking us, what do these simple symbols actually represent? Do they actually represent solidarity and inclusivity, or are they also presenting new ways in which exclusion is being reinforced? So when we think of dating apps, usually we think of Tinder or Coffee Meets Bagel, Grinder. So these are the more traditional dating apps. But when I was having a guest lecture in the Philippines, I noticed that a lot of young people were also using games to, as a means of dating. So one of the participants there told me after this Jamboard exercise that games like Valorant, for example, they're using it to date other people because they can see how other people socialize and act using games. So also, a lot of, in my investigation on gay amateur pornography in the Philippines, a lot of gay men and women also were using Twitter to search for sexual and romantic intimacy. So here, I wish to expand our notion of dating app as something beyond, the scope of Tinder, Bumble, etc. So, so with the increasing politicization of gender and sexual identity and intimacy, it's being based on partisan politics and ideological lines. So, and as I said before, these symbols have made their way into dating apps. But mostly what I notice is this is something that's more present among people who describe themselves as progressive, liberals, or Democrats or democratic advocates. Not so much when we talk about the other political side. So that's something that I want to that's something that I haven't really answered yet, but something that I want to mention that I observed. Okay, so here I'm going to discuss three ways in which political ideologies are being used or represented in dating apps. And I will reflect later or tell you later the experiences of some women that I have interviewed for this. So women and queer men. So first is the use of native filters, because there are some dating apps that actually ask you what your political leanings are. Although this can be skipped usually, but nonetheless, people use this to filter out people who don't match their political leanings. So some apps contain optional information that signify political stance or religious views. According to one of my participants, political stance and religious views is a good measure of someone's moral compass. So they think that the use of political symbols or religious symbols actually represent someone's sense of ethics. So just Paul said wrote in 2017 that soliciting specific profile information leads to simplification of gender and sexual identities. And now political stance is adding to this one. If you've used dating apps, there will be instances that you will be asked about what's your height, what's your body weight, what are your interests, and now political and religious beliefs are being folded into this components of what should be our identities. So filters also allow apps to streamline available profiles for swiping or interaction, because mostly if you see that someone doesn't share your or you can filter someone who doesn't share your political beliefs, and then you don't see them in your grid. So here algorithms is reinforcing what mode of compatibility and intimacy we can get from dating apps. But I want to delve deeper into the other ones. First is the use of malleable symbols. So this is realized in the color of hearts, for example. Color of hearts, color of ribbons to signify someone's political stance. So according to my interviews, my interviewees see posting these colors or symbols as resistance towards populist, authoritarian, or sometimes what they consider as macho governments. In one of the cases where I was talking to a former student in Manila who was using dating apps and was actively putting out these symbols, she was telling me, well, Duterte is advocating or showing toxic masculinity. So sporting these pink hearts actually allow us to, counter his toxic masculinity and show our resistance to it. It allows us to advocate for gender equality and other things that Duterte is, other wrong things that Duterte is doing. So here, symbols represent political leanings and values, and it actually works in visuals-driven environment. In dating apps, we're usually asked to provide pictures or to provide images or videos instead of writing lengthy descriptions. And these symbols fit the visual nature of dating apps. So these are some of the examples in which dating apps are allowing us to express our political beliefs. Some of them may be more graphic than others. So here, for example, is the use of yellow heart. But this to signify one's membership in the yellow movement. This one is a photo of a graffiti that reads "police are cunts." So this is this is something that was also being espoused by the Yellow Movement. The this antagonistic attitude towards the police because of what they claim as police brutality. So there's this photo that signifies one's resistance towards the ruling government. Also, this one, well, this one is a bit more a bit more towards the COVID policy in Hong Kong, but this is also something about resisting what people think are unreasonable quarantine or social distancing restrictions that the government is imposing. So other examples is the use of yellow ribbons on dating apps, and even if this is and even if this is used for search for friends, long-term relationship, or even sex partners. Later on, I will read some of the excerpts from my interviews, and then this one is a bit more explicit, that tells people from China to just skip the profile. So this is a clear indication of anti-mainland Chinese sentiments. So another is the use of codes, or more innocent looking photos or images that insiders or people of the same political beliefs only them know. So one of my participants, Archie, was telling me most women nowadays after the protest remove all of their yellow ribbons, those that he knows. But some of them would put photos where protests were held to signify their political stance. So for example, he told me that those women that he noticed were uploading photos of them in Victoria Park actually tend to ask him about whether he's yellow or not. So these are some of the things that he was saying are insider knowledge that only insiders or only people who subscribe to the same political beliefs would know. Another one that I talked to is Lynn, who is a Chinese cis woman, also a PhD student and a friend of mine. And she said that maybe it's the national security law that scared people from putting their political beliefs in spaces where they are identified. On Tinder, for example, even if someone can put out fake names, most likely people will put out their real faces, allowing them to be identified. So with the imposition of national security law, Lin thinks that people are deterred from talking about their political views. She also thinks that Chinese women are not supposed to talk about politics because this is a man's thing, according to her. So she said, even when you look at the Hong Kong protests, it's very masculine because there are more men involved. Of course, there are women, but there are more men that I see. So she thinks that politics in the is a very masculine thing. So other people would try to be low key when they express their political beliefs, like what Anna here is saying, who is a pansexual Filipino woman. But also among gay men, they're saying that by displaying your political colors, you actually make it quicker for you to get matches or potential sex partners and romantic partners, because by expressing your political views up front, you're not gonna waste time talking about asking about one's political beliefs. And according to my participants, even if you don't put your political beliefs on your profile, they're gonna ask for it anyway. So what Chan here was saying was, put it anyway, because that will be asked of you. So that's gonna save us time from seeking relationship in this dating app. So here Anna is also saying in most of the things that she wants to find in dating apps, she's not going to have sex, romantic relationships, or even friendly relationship with people who don't share her same political beliefs. According to Nicole, who is a Filipino cis woman, it's okay for sex as long as that person is not a diehard Duterte supporter or Marcos apologist. Otherwise, she's not gonna have sex with them. So another participant that I talked to, Lam, was telling me if it's about sex, he doesn't want to get pleasure from people who he considers as enemies. And that is because people who don't share his political values are people who contribute to his oppression. He was telling me that as a gay man, there's a lot of discrimination against gay men in Hong Kong society. And these people who are supporting the government are also supporting the oppression of queer individuals in Hong Kong and elsewhere. So he's saying, no, it's not possible that I will have intimate sexual relationship with people who he sees contribute to his oppression. So, but some people are also feeling that this is becoming more and more polarizing. So one of the pornographers that I was talking to before, Gabriel, was telling me that he's not going to post his political beliefs on Twitter simply because it is instigating cancel culture on social media. So he said that if people who don't share the same political beliefs meet in social media, they're just gonna argue and cancel each other, and that's not gonna be productive, and that's not gonna encourage real dialogue and understanding between these two opposing camps. So here I want to for the last part of my presentation, I want to look at how this polarization of polarization of dating apps contribute to our sense of activism and also bring about exclusion. So here it's clear that dating is becoming more and more polarized and has become more and more about someone's view about authoritarianism, populism, and toxic masculinity that authoritarian governments are espousing. In a sense, having all these political statements in dating apps is a way of modernizing the political scene. In the Philippine politics is mostly personality driven, meaning personalities or politicians are treated not based on their platforms of governance, but based on based on their family's reputation and fame. So that's personality driven politics. So here there's an attempt to insert political discourse in the personal spaces of people, and that is countering this notion that places like Hong Kong and even the Philippines, by extension, is politically inactive. So in a way, I see it as I see the polarization of or politicization of dating apps as a way of modernizing the way we talk about politics. Also, in a sense, gender and sexual minorities are given some level of political participation while they are negotiating intimacy. So here, gender and sexual minorities can be more upfront about how they think their intimate lives should be and what they are looking for their intimate partners. But having said that, there are also ways in which the polarization and politicization of dating apps reinforces existing exclusionary discourses. So for one thing, there's in polarization of intimacy, people are bringing preconceived political beliefs into how they negotiate intimacy, and these tends to breed cancel culture, bullying, and even censorship. And that's why some people who are not keen on discussing political stance, they don't say it they don't say their political stance at all. So they think that displaying your political choices is deterrent for swipes and matches, which will hinder the way they are looking for matches or potential romantic and sexual partners. Um, in the end, what I want to say is when we talk about exclusion and reinforcement of status quo, this boils down to how people choose their partners and how politics and the polarization of intimacy reflects how we search for values and how our taste for partners reflects our sense of taste. So as Rodel was saying in 2001, our choice of partner is always based not on our differences, but on how similar are we with the partners that we are looking for. So these are some of my initial thoughts on this research project, and I look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you so much.